1 in 4 drugs on our pharmacy shelves and 65% of cancer drugs come from plants. Taxol, the most widely used cancer drug in the world, is made from the bark of the Pacific yew. Here in Jordan, Bedouin nomads have been using native plants for medicine for thousands of years. Today, scientists are racing to unlock the secrets of these ancient remedies.
What you have is truly a treasure. What you have is not very available everywhere.
When I started working on these medicinal plants, the first thing I thought of, how powerful are these plants?
The question is made urgent by the ongoing destruction of the natural habitat for these native species. What did ancient practitioners of the healing arts know? And will we be able to use that knowledge to discover new plant-based cures in time?
This is the Badia of the Middle East. To look at it in the dry season, which is most of the year, it's hard to believe this land can support life, much less produce plants that are beneficial for humans. But there are those who believe otherwise.
For any person, it is a dry, empty space. But for me, it is a paradise.
Jordanian botanist Dr. Sausan Oran is on a journey to catalog and preserve the wild plants of her homeland. She sees beauty in the more than 4,000 varieties of plants she's found to date. Beauty and possibility.
I noticed that 40% of those plants are medicinal. Knowing that our ancestors used those plants for treating medicine, this has encouraged us as scientists or as researchers to look for the specific active compounds. Every time I go to the field, I feel that I'm going to the field for the first time. Why? Because I'm hoping to find something new, hoping to find medicinal plants with medicinal potential.
While out in the field, Dr. Oran seeks out local people and traditional healers to find out how the various plants are used.
This is Gesum.
Do people in this area use this plant?
Yes, they use it. They use it for stomach pain when you get a cold.
Do they boil it and drink it?
Yes, they boil it and drink it, and some people use it with tea.
Which part do they use? All the plant or just the flowers?
Just the flowers.
The medicinal uses of these plants have been tested and refined over thousands of years. For example, these Mediterranean gourds, colocynth, or hansal in Arabic, were used by the Greeks and Romans. Today, pharmacological research is confirming their effectiveness in treating diabetes. Ancient Arabic texts are another important source of information for research on medicinal plants. Many Westerners don't realize that while Europe was in the Dark Ages, Arab physicians of the 8th to the 11th centuries were laying the foundation of the institutions and science of modern medicine. Arab scholars studied and translated the Greek texts. They opened the first true hospitals and pharmacies, and designed early clinical drug trials. They understood the importance of diet and produced medical texts that were used until well into the 19th century. What contributions might they make in the 21st century? Dr. Oran and her colleagues believe important clues might lie in Arabic folk medicine, still practiced by the Bedouins, or Bedu, as they call themselves. Tribal nomads, the Bedu proudly trace their lineage back to Ishmael, son of Abraham. They are known for their distinctive tents, which squat low to the ground to withstand stiff desert winds. This is the Badia, a largely undeveloped desert, roughly the size of North Dakota. The Badia makes up 80% of Jordan and reaches into Syria, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia. To survive here, a plant needs deep roots and stamina. With an average annual rainfall of only 2 to 8 inches, seeds can lie dormant for months, even years, waiting for rain. When it comes, usually in the spring, there is an explosion of bloom and new growth. The basalt plains cover much of the northern Badia. These stones make it hard to drive or to walk, for humans and animals alike. Camels, able to travel long distances without water, were for centuries the only reliable transportation in the Badia. But today, herdsmen drive trucks, and camels are greatly outnumbered by sheep and goats who threaten to overgraze this Spartan land. Jordan has 2.5 million sheep, 3 times as many as the land would comfortably support. Further damage occurs when people cut down or dig up woody shrubs for fuel, which worsens erosion and ultimately eliminates that species from the landscape. To raise more food, so-called deep plowing is used to cultivate the edges of the desert, so that grain crops like wheat, barley, and lentils can be planted. The ecology of the Badia teeters on the brink as pressure to feed growing populations increases. The Badia landscape may be inhospitable, but guests are always welcomed in the Bedu tent. No traveler is turned away. Bedu hospitality is legendary and is a matter of honor and pride. Today, guests are expected at the tent of Abu Shayam. The extended family is already making preparations. Bread is being made on a curved metal pan propped up over a fire. Here on the private side of the tent, the women cook and tend the children. At night, the family sleeps here. On the other side of a fabric wall is the public space where guests are received, news exchanged, and coffee served. According to tradition, a goat is slaughtered to prepare a feast for the guests. This marks the day as a special occasion, something that occurs only perhaps once a month. By mid-morning, the sun is already high enough that Abu Shayam and his wife raise the fabric walls to provide more shade and air circulation. Summer days in the Badia can be as hot as 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Nights are much cooler. Winter temperatures get as low as 40 degrees. Snow is rare but not unheard of. Normally, Abu Shayam and his family would live 4 months a year in their cement blockhouse in a town 40 miles away, where the older children attend school. But since the drought of 1991, they've lived year-round in their tent so they can cover the distances necessary to find enough pasture for their sheep. Today, the herd is some 20 miles north, near the Syrian border. Abu Shayam uses this ancient Mercedes truck to visit the herd, haul water from a lake northeast of here, and drive to a market an hour-and-a-half away for fresh vegetables and other supplies. Fuel from propane tanks is supplemented by brush that has been collected from the Badia, a process that can take several hours a day. Bedu collect wild plants and use nearly 170 plant species to treat everything from colds and skin disorders to bites and stings. Today, Abu Shayam is going out to collect Artemisia herbs, alba or wormwood as it is commonly called in English. Abu Shayam knows its many uses.
We use it when we get a bad cold and when we have a bad stomach ache. It's good for the sheep too. When they have stomach worms, this plant kills the worms. It's a good medicine plant. Some people collect it and sell it to the herbalist. They also take it to the pharmacies, and many medicines are made from these plants.
Back at the tent, the food is ready to be served. Abu Shayam invites his guests to a feast featuring a goat and vegetables. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, the artemisia is boiled with water to make a tea the Bedou use as a general health tonic. Different parts of the plant can also be used to successfully treat diabetes. Just as they move their herds to take advantage of changing pasture conditions, the Bedou shift between folk medicine to modern medicine, depending on the circumstances and the nature of the problem. For example, when Abu Shayam's young son Badi became ill with abdominal pain and a fever, his father took him to a pediatrician in a town 30 miles away. But after 3 weeks of medicine, the boy was no better.
We took him to the doctor, but we got no results. So we took him to the healer, and he is okay.
The healer they visited lives in Safawi, a town an hour and a half away. More than 15,000 Bedou have settled here. Owoyed is Bedou, her face tattooed in the old fashion. She says that years ago her people kept camels. Her knowledge of healing has been passed down from her mother and her mother's mother before that. Today, she teaches her son. Much of Owoyed's inventory comes from an herbalist. She uses special, non-toxic medicines to treat children. Her reputation is known throughout the Badia.
I treat children from 1 month old to 5 years old. I treat him for ecto and rami, and if he gets a rash on his skin and starts crying, we apply this material to his skin and make him inhale some and cover him. Then he will get well if God helps.
Islam teaches that God has provided a remedy for every illness, and man should search for them and use them with skill and compassion. Bedou healers offer their service free of charge, believing it is their duty to help anyone who needs it. But most patients, like Abu Shayam and his son, return later with a gift for the healer if the cure is successful. Just as in modern medicine, there are many specialists. So too do the traditional Bedou healers have specialties.
My name, Menwar al-Fawaz, from Sardiya tribe. You're welcome to make an interview with my mother. You're welcome in my house.
Patients visit this house, where Menwir gives advice and treats eye problems. Menwir says his mother is between 80 and 90 years old. It's not unusual for older Bedou to be unsure of their age. She learned about the medicinal plants from her mother.
Yes, very wise woman. She have a big mind, and she give advice to Sardiya tribe. They respect my mother.
Menwir, who collects her own plants and dries them, says many are getting more difficult to find. She says that 10 species, grown only in her area, have already been wiped out. Another healer, Salim, grows 10 different medicinal plants in a special garden. She harvests and dries them for use with patience. Another 10 varieties have to be collected from the wild or gotten from nomadic sheep herders.
I have pain on my arm, and I heard that you have something for it.
Yes, I have medicine for that.
I want you to treat it for me.
This is Hawa Jawani and Haba Samra, cooked in oil.
How many times do I need to do this?
3 days. Take this and use it in the morning and in the evening. This is work. This is Etrofan.
What is the Etrofan for?
It is good for diabetes. This plant for kidneys.
For the one that has kidney problem?
Yes.
If a healer like Salim doesn't have the particular plant a patient needs, that patient is sent to buy it from an herbalist or attar. Abdel Nasser al-Khalidi is an attar in a town called Mafra. Al-Khalidi has been in the business 15 years and stocks material from more than 200 kinds of plants.
Where do you get all these things? Most of it from Jordan, some from other countries, but the majority from the Jordanian desert. Do you go by yourself and collect them? There are some specialized people who go and collect these plants, and sometimes just regular individuals do. Some of these plants, you cannot find them easily. You find them only in areas where not many people go. In the urbanized areas, they have disappeared.
The plants that attars and healers rely on for their medicines, the plants Dr. Sausan Oran is studying, are increasingly threatened by environmental degradation. Most Jordanians live in the western part of the country. Amman, the capital city, is the largest, with a population of 2 million. Despite the ready availability of modern medicine, you can still find herbalist shops like this one downtown. Efforts are underway to preserve the body as native plants and unlock their secrets, mining age-old folk medicine with the tools of 21st century science.
Knowing that our ancestors used those plants for treating medicine, this has encouraged us as scientists or as researchers to look for the specific active compounds.
Here at the University of Jordan, Dr. Sausan Oran is part of a team of scientists working with native plants. The Jordan Badia Research and Development Program is backed by Jordan's Higher Council for Science and Technology.
We don't work behind desks, we don't work behind fences. We're there with the people, for the people. We want to explore, but we don't want to exploit. And that's, I think, is the difference. There's great potential for economic development through the plants and plant cultivation. Don't forget, I think the important thing is here that we're not teaching anybody new or totally different, something out of the culture, something that needs a lot of training or expensive training.
When I started working on these medicinal plants, the first thing I thought of, how these plants, how powerful are these plants?
For more than 2 decades, Dr. Oran has been seeking out her country's native plants and bringing them back to her lab to be catalogued and studied. Named Sausan by her lawyer father for the national flower of Jordan, the black iris, Dr. Oran learned to love wildflowers as a child. Years ago, she chose botany over a more prestigious career in medicine. Ironically, the research she's doing today on plants could lay the groundwork for new medical treatments. Dr. Oran is excited about helping to discover the potential of what she calls Jordan's wild medical wealth.
Very little has been done on these, which I consider very promising plants for everybody.
She began by collecting and cataloging the wild plants of her homeland. The herbarium she started now has more than 4,000 different species, identified and labeled by their Latin botanical names. The plants, which are treated to protect them from damage and decay, are preserved for anyone who wants to learn about this rich resource. The herbarium also has a seed gene bank to ensure that this national heritage can be fully developed in the future. Some of the endangered species have the potential to become commercial crops that will help the economy. Others, like the plants the Bedou use, may have medical or pharmaceutical uses, but first they must be saved from extinction. In this sterile tissue culture room, Dr. Oran and her colleagues are finding ways to grow many new plants from tiny seeds, pieces of leaves, or simple root tissue. The plant matter is grown in a nutrient medium in petri dishes under laboratory conditions. When all goes well, a tissue mass called a callus develops.
This is the product. When I get the callus, of course I feel happy, because when I treat it later with a combination of hormones, this will differentiate in a further stage into the different parts of the plants. This is a small fragment of a whole bulb from a plant called black iris. So from this fragment I can get, as you see, 3 to 4 plantlets.
Once the plants have reached a certain stage in the lab, they are ready to be acclimatized and planted outdoors.
They're so beautiful, aren't they?
The plan is to re-establish them in the wild and save them from extinction due to over-collecting by people and overgrazing by livestock.
This plant is just not only beautiful flower, showy flower, but it's well-known fact. It's been used by the old ancient people.
If folk medicine has provided the clues that launched the search, it is science that dictates the process.
We don't need the whole plant for our tests. Sometimes seeds, we take seeds sometimes we take flower. So it depends on the uses of this plant, which active part of this plant has to be used for our test. We grind the leaves, for example. We take the powder, put it simply in a little amount of boiled water, shake it. Then we wait until the precipitate comes down to the bottom of the test tube. This liquid part, this is the important part of the plant because it's got the active ingredients.
The chemical compound is sent to university chemists for identification and analysis.
As a scientist and as a researcher, I have to know which is the compounds that are responsible for treating these diseases or these ailments.
A series of tests have shown that many wild Jordanian plants can inhibit the growth of tumors. Dr. Oran is especially excited about a breakthrough with a plant called globularia from the south of the country. Tissue culture has helped re-establish it in the wild. Even more exciting, results from tests done with globularia extract shows it inhibits tumors on potatoes 85% of the time. That anti-leukemic result is so strong that further trials are now being done with animals. Dr. Oran dreams of helping to cure leukemia in humans.
If they manage to apply what we started and find it very much applicable and successful, I feel that I managed to achieve a victory. I think that this is the most important thing, the most achievable thing that have ever done in my life. And I'll feel great, really, I'll feel great.
Another day ends for Abu Shayam and his family. In the Badia, modern forces are slowly changing this lifestyle that had remained essentially unchanged for at least 5,000 years. Along with the lifestyle, cures used by ancient cultures may be disappearing. If the native medical plants become extinct, humankind may have lost powerful new drugs to fight some of our deadliest diseases.
The plants in the Middle East, I can describe them as valuable treasure. We have responsibility, for the sake of saving our wild plants, our natural resources, and saving the earth as much as we can for our generation and for the generations to come.
This region of the southern coast of Mexico is one of the world's great centers for crafts and folk art, with a history reaching back more than 2,000 years. The tradition is very much alive today. Many villages here specialize in a single craft: pottery from local clays, weaving from sheep's wool, basketry made of palm fronds, or the fanciful wooden carvings known as alebrijes. In this village of Arasola, many families have home studios where they carve copal wood from nearby forests. Other family members do the intricate painting that brings these imaginative carvings to life. These wooden creatures, monsters, animals, and everything in between, are popular with tourists for their beauty and authenticity. With few modern conveniences and an agrarian economy, the local people have a close relationship with nature. They use native plants for food, for their livelihood, and for healing.
My mother showed me because her children would get sick, and she would look for herbs. She would bathe us or give us something to drink. I remember the herbs she used, so I could use them too.
Amada Aguilares Martinez is a curandera, a healer. She collects dozens of different herbs from the land near her village and still others from a distant canyon during the rainy season.
I do work with herbs, but I also work with God, because God gave us these plants on the land to cure His children. Here, and this one is called chepito. What is chepito good for? It is good to use against colds. And this one is called yerba moradita. It is good for when you eat something spicy, and if you have heartburn, you can take some of this and it will go away.
The people who come to her pay Amada whatever they think it's worth, although she says another curandero nearby does have set rates for his cures. Since modern doctors are far away and more expensive, herbal healers are the primary source of medical care for many Oaxaqueños, who are mostly subsistence farmers. Amada is sad that none of her children wanted to learn from her. They've all moved away from the village. She worries her knowledge of desert plants will die with her.
What I tell people is that they need to learn, because I will not live forever.
But today, worries are set aside. This is the feast of St. Andrew the Apostle, patron saint of this village. These boys and girls receive their first communion and share a special blessing from the Virgin Mary by passing out colorful paper flowers. Among those returning to celebrate with the village is one of Amada's former patients, Rosalina Sanchez Mendoza. She and her husband, Prisciliano Cortez Cruz, have brought their youngest daughter, Hiral, to see her grandparents for the first time. Rosalina's mother has been busy preparing food for the festival. Today, she and Rosalina get some dried native corn, a major local crop ready to be soaked, ground, and made into tortillas. The visit goes quickly, and soon it's time for the couple to leave the old life and return to what they hope will be a much better future. Like so many other Mexicans eager to work, that means that they head north. A 3-day journey by bus on rough roads to La Frontera, the border. Their new home, Ciudad Juarez, is separated from El Paso, Texas by the Rio Grande. Buses come here to bring workers to the maquiladores factories run just across the Mexican border by American companies. There they can earn in 1 hour what is a full day's wage for a man elsewhere in Mexico, about $2. Most live in outlying districts called colonias, in one-room buildings made of cement if they're lucky, but often in tin or even cardboard shacks. There's no indoor plumbing. Running water and electricity are only recently available. Streets are unpaved. Dust and wild dogs everywhere. Crime is rampant. Still, there is the hope of a better life. If not for Rosalina and Prisciliano, then at least for their 4 children. Here in Anapra, on the outskirts of Juarez, the older children can go to school. Prisciliano's family, unlike most of their neighbors, has running water. Prisciliano's 70-year-old mother would rather be back in her old village, but lives with them to help out with the children and the chores.
Buenas tardes.
Rosalina goes door to door in the better, older neighborhoods of Juarez to sell the baskets, purses, and animal figures that Prisciliano weaves at home.
For us, weaving is like an inheritance that our grandparents left us. And we go out in the city and find ways to earn money with our work. Because we know there are others that when they get to the city, they don't know where to go or what to do. They don't have money and they don't know where to work to earn some money. But at least we can trust that we know what to work on. Even though we know we will struggle, but we can weave this little animal and go to a house and sell it, and we can earn 5 or 10 pesos and then share it with the family.
Prisciliano says he loves weaving. He learned from his father and is teaching his children. There have been some modern enhancements.
This needle is made out of a car antenna, and here we just took it to be cut, and this helps us a lot.
So far, between the weaving and playing in a band, Prisciliano earns just barely enough to buy groceries for the family. Most meals are tortillas, beans, and rice. It's a lean existence. There's no extra money for medicine. When one of the children is sick, Rosalina and Prisciliano come to Cristo Rey, a missionary clinic started 4 years ago by Dr. San Juana Mendoza.
I come from a mining family. My father, my grandfather, my uncles, they were miners. They work in the Sierra Madres of Chihuahua, and I was aware somehow about the hardness of living in isolated places and living with no medical sources available. And was for me a very deep memory, very sad memory, seeing my mom not sleeping in the whole night because she had a baby sick and she didn't have sources sometimes to go to a doctor. And for me that was a very painful, a very pitiful memory to see a mother suffering because the child is sick. We have population that comes from the country areas of the south of Mexico, like Oaxaca, and they come to the north, migrating, looking for job opportunities. These people are very, very low education and low income. Their average income is about $35 to $45 per week. Their main source of work is the factories, the maquilas. It's very hard for them to keep a steady employment. And they have a steady income. Unfortunately, their lifestyle changed for bad. They tend to buy fritos, they tend to buy junk food, and they tend to get very addicted to sodas, to sugar. So they start developing diseases that were not common in their villages, like hypertension, diabetes, arthritis, even depression. This is very sad.
This young woman suffers from diabetes and high blood pressure. A prescription drug can help control it, but it is very expensive. So Dr. Mendoza teaches her about some herbal remedies that can help her reduce the dose she needs.
I recommend them to use, natural things that are available, like a healthy diet, a healthy plan of exercising, and also to use wild herbs that are available in our community. One of those herbal remedies is named prodigiosa. Also, we call it hamula. And the scientific name is Bruchelia grandiflora. And it grows wild here. It's about 1 meter or 2 meters high. And this herbal is very efficient to lower the blood sugar levels. And the people can grow them themselves, in pots. They can grow them in their homes and have it fresh. And the only thing that takes is just to make an infusion, a little tea, and drink it 2 or 3 times a day. Sometimes my patients come here, with 400s, with 500s of blood sugar, and they, with medication, diet, and exercise again, combined with this herbal medicine, they can go in normal limits. So I encourage them, not only to look for the herb, but to plant it in their own homes. After all, many medicines are based on herbal principles, Many herbs have given us the active principle and the synthetic medicines. I see bunches of patients, lots of families, they migrate from the countryside, and they tend to disconnect themselves with the roots, with the cultural roots, and they tend to forget the ancestors' knowledge. Every tribe used to have their own medicines and their own spices and their own food. One of my duties is to remind them about this link between them and their environment, to help them to recognize all these sources that we have, to recognize the plants and to accept and to come back to the practical herbs that can save them money, can help them to stay healthy, and make them more independent. But this desert is alive, it's full of life, it's full of plants, it's full of richness, it's full of sources for people to have a better life and even to fight some diseases. ¿Qué le pasa, muchito?
Today, Rosalina and Prisciliano have brought in 5-year-old Iran, who has been complaining about a blister in his mouth. They pay a very modest fee and bring the doctor one of the animals Prisciliano has woven. After an exam, she prescribes a rinse made from aloe vera and an herb called malva, which is inexpensive and available at the local market. If that doesn't clear up the infection, only then will she prescribe a modern medicine.
Medicine is very expensive, especially that they don't have insurance or medical benefits. Dios te bendiga, Prisciliano. I regard myself like a healer. Still, my main concern is how to teach the people to stay healthy, to stay in the right path, and to prevent complications that will take them to hospitals or traumatic treatments. This is one of my goals, and this is my reward. If eventually a woman comes to me and she said, I know how to take care of certain illnesses. I don't have to come to you. I feel like clapping. I feel like laughing and praising God.
That passion for educating others about the value of native herbal remedies has brought Dr. Mendoza to New Mexico State University in Las Cruces. She comes to this summer workshop run by Dr. Mary O'Connell. For 6 weeks, students study medicinal plants of the Southwest.
Bueno, pues muchísimas gracias por haberme invitado. Thank you very much for having invited me.
Dr. Mendoza has been invited to share her experiences treating patients with medicinal herbs, many of which are found on both sides of the border.
It's kind of ashy green color. It has a very delicate and very remarkable aroma, and the leaves are very distinguished, like a little saw. And once that you see it, you smell it, you have it in your hands, you will not forget it.
The workshop, now in its fourth year, is funded by the National Institutes of Health.
The goal of the NIH-funded project is that these students would be attracted, trained, and ultimately pursue PhD degrees in any number of disciplines that constitute biomedical research. Chemistry, biology, physiology, medicinal plants, natural products chemistry, microbiology, bioengineering, all kinds of specific topic areas.
The program has special appeal for students from minority cultures.
Many students in the Southwest come from cultures that use plants as medicines for improving quality of life issues, for relieving minor aches and pains, for colds, for treatments of modest infections. And so it's very, very reasonable to excite these students about how the chemistries in those plants could be studied to have an efficacy in a biomedical context.
Once I got really sunburnt really bad, and my grandpa, he's not a medicine man, but he knew basic things, how to use certain plants, and he made this sort of like pasty stuff, and he put it on my skin, and it soothed it.
In the old days, they used to do that.
My grandmother did. She used a lot of plant materials, whether they be boiled or actually eaten directly, for anything from cuts to wounds to intestinal problems to pink eye.
Today, the class is on an herb walk in the nearby Organ Mountains. Dr. O'Connell has invited nurse and herbalist Deborah Brandt to lead the class.
I'm on the State Board of Nursing, the Integrative Medicine Committee, where we're trying to integrate and bring together different traditions and different aspects of medicine. This is a good area for medicinal plants because it's in a transitional zone between the lower desert and the higher desert, and so there's a lot of overlap. That's why I like this trail for medicinal plants. We've seen probably 15 or 20 plants: Brachialia, Garrya, silk tassel. We've seen mesquite, acacia, prickly pear, the cholla, desert willow. They're learning the basics with botany of these plants, why local peoples use them and how they use them. They're also appreciating how the environment will influence the growth of these plants, how not any one plant is the same as any other plant, what the effects of those then might be on considerations of how these compounds accumulate in the plant. It's called mariola, and if you smell it, it's everyone is a scientist. Humans are scientists. That's what brings me to work every day, is how does this work? How does this organism behave? Why does this plant make this chemical? That's a whole other side to the project we really haven't described yet. We as humans think the plants make drugs. The plants make chemicals for their own uses, and we've learned how to exploit them. And so these same chemicals that plants make to attract animals as pollinators or repel animals because they chew them up are then the same chemicals that then become useful to us in a drug setting. We've generated a list of plants to study based on probably 100 years of what's called ethnobotanical literature. The basis or the hypothesis is that if you use plants as a source of drugs that have been identified by cultures as being important medical agents, you increase the odds of finding efficacious chemistries 2 to 3-fold. So the drug companies know this factor. Medical communities understand this. So what we're hoping to show is that students will learn how drugs are developed by studying the whole process of chemical syntheses, chemical extractions, analytical tools, and then testing those chemistries for their efficacy.
The students spend hours learning precise lab procedures to be used on the plants.
How to extract and purify the compounds, how to identify them structurally, what kinds of solvents to use, how to design biological experiments to test for the ability of some of these extracts in controlled settings to inhibit the growth of different microorganisms.
But they also discuss the ethics involved in collecting native plants from the wild.
You could say plagiarizing, but the word biopiracy is being used now to describe the collecting of plant material, information about biological materials from all around the world.
Would India have any sovereign rights over the plant?
Yes. And this is the idea that developed nations go to regions of high genetic or biological diversity and collect from there valuable plant or animal materials, living materials, and use those in another context, and then often sell them back to the country from which this material originated.
Not only are students exposed to the ethics of biopiracy in developing countries, but Dr. O'Connell has arranged an exciting collaboration with a cutting-edge research center. A small group of young scientists will be taking their desert plants to Seattle for testing.
I want to welcome you to the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center and hope you have a productive and instructive couple of days with us. My lab at the Hutchinson Center specializes in drug discovery, and the group at New Mexico State studies native plants of the Southwest. Plants have always been a rich source of biologically active compounds, medicinal compounds, and so we saw an opportunity to put together a program where we would screen compounds extracted from southwestern plants in our anti-cancer assays.
The students brought not only their compounds, but their enthusiasm and their own reasons for pursuing this kind of research.
This is kind of a personal issue. And this actually started back in 1993 when my mother was actually diagnosed with breast cancer. She had a mastectomy, which, as you all know, is a removal of the breast. And that, to me, just was kind of like an awakening. It's what I wanted to do. I was a realist. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to play sports all my life. I've always been a fan of science. It's a totally different world.
Other natives in New Mexico, indigenous people I'm speaking about, have used this plant for illnesses in the stomach, so all the gastrointestinal problems. And so hopefully I can find some activity from this plant for something of that nature.
And then I broke down the plant into its separate organs, leaf, roots, and stems.
The great data drive ends up with lots of information, but one of the key points is to keep track of what everybody did. And so if a mistake is made in which well a sample goes into, or a code is incorrectly entered, we can spend a lot of time retracing errors and waste time and money. So what I'm doing is making sure that we know exactly what went into those wells, and so we can go back and find those plants, find the extracts, work them up, purify compounds from them, should any of these crude preparations have an interesting activity.
Most of our anti-cancer drugs, or at least many of them, are derived from natural sources, plants and microorganisms. So over the millennia that evolution has worked on these sources, they have developed very sophisticated pathways to produce small molecules, what we know as drugs. And that evolutionary process has yielded things that are very specific in their action. What we're trying to do is to discover whether that specificity is useful in the treatment of cancer. There are over 100 specific diseases, specific indications that we collectively call cancer, and those all have unique genetic fingerprints. So the likelihood that any single drug will be active against the whole spectrum of tumors is small. What we're trying to do is now match specific medicines with specific genetic fingerprints to treat cancers.
Today, the students are testing their plant extracts in baker's yeast.
We've genetically modified these yeasts to model some of the genetic alterations that occur in human cancers. The development process, should we see promising activity, is long and complicated, but fairly predictable. So first we would fractionate the crude extracts into individual compounds and isolate the individual chemical that's responsible for the activity. It would then go through a process of preclinical testing, where we would test it using human cancer cell lines, as well as cancer models in animals. It would go through toxicology testing to make sure that it's a safe compound, and ultimately, if all those are positive, into human clinical trials.
Simon says developing a new drug can take anywhere from 5 to 10 years and cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Still, he sees reason for optimism.
There's always a chance that medicinal compounds will be found in the most unlikely places. The Pacific yew tree is something that we see here in Seattle almost every day, and it looks not terribly promising, but it's a source of Taxol, which is one of the most effective anti-cancer agents known. So yes, I'm very optimistic that we will find something.
In fact, these three plants, bearberry, datura, and wild mustard, brought by New Mexico State students, showed promising results in the first round of tests. Or perhaps the next breakthrough may come from the medicinal plants that Rosalina and Prisciliano buy at their local herb market. These botanical wonders, like the ones from New Mexico State, could hold valuable clues for medical researchers. This is the southern Caribbean island of Curaçao. Its arid limestone terrain is harsh, at times almost desolate. People have braved this sun-beaten, dry land for centuries, mastering the use of its sparse vegetation. And for some, this tradition continues even now.
This is the Loki Loki. It's a very nice plant. When you have very much sun, it will close the leaves, and so take like looking for shade. We use it for when we have a headache, so you can take little bits, and do it around the head, and it's very, very good for people with headaches.
This is Dina Fires. Today she is collecting medicinal plants from hilltops in the middle of the island. Dina is known throughout Curaçao as a healer, or in the local language of Papiamento, a curioso. She will take these plants home and make blends of herbal medicine to sell. Her knowledge of the local botany is impressive.
This is called the Barba di Menishi, or the Marie di Palu, of Barba di Caduci. It grows like a parasite on the plant, and this we use for when people has gallbladder problems. We use this one. I give my knowledge away because I got it from the older people. They gave me their knowledge, and I feel that I have to give that knowledge to other people, to young people, so they can spread it.
Besides collecting medicinal plants, Dina is on a mission to also preserve them. In the early 1980s, she began Den Paradera, a magnificent botanical garden where she propagates over 300 species. When Dina was unable to find certain types on Curaçao, she traveled to the neighboring islands of Bonaire and Aruba, where the plants had not yet been eliminated from the landscape.
Yes, I started in Paradera because I saw that we were losing a lot of information, a lot of herbs. You could be today here and see a lot of herbs. The next day you will be not finding them anymore. So I started to bring the herbs to this garden, to keep the knowledge. The garden is very important to me because I cultivate the medicinal herbs. So we can know the stories, we can know what kind of herbs we have on this island, and also to learn how to use it. It will be a pity that we lose all the informations of the uses of the culture, because people don't know how to use the herbs. The garden is divided in three parts: a botanical part, a historical part, and the production. The botanical parts are the herbs divided in sections for the digestion, for the heart, for the respiratory system. When I started, the people thought I was crazy because I had a good job. Why should I go and make my hands dirt with the land? So they thought, But I had that dream that I needed to conserve the culture, to conserve the information, and to have the plants. So I went on. Even if people were laughing, it didn't matter. The slaves, when they came here, They brought seeds, you know. Nobody knew that they had the seeds with them. They wanted to survive. They didn't know where they were going, you know. And also when they were here, they could recognize some of the trees and plants that they had in Africa. There were people who know the medicinal healing, so as the medicinal doctors, you know, the healing doctors, so they could go to those healing doctors so they could find help.
Here in the Kurahulanda Museum in nearby Willemstad, actors from the Living History Theatre Group portray plantation life and the tragic plight of the captured Africans.
Should be good. Should be nice to you. Go.
I'll be okay.
Go.
What?
Go.
Keep that one away from her.
Experts estimate that during the 18th and 19th centuries, millions of people were enslaved along Africa's western coast. The Dutch, in need of securing their new colony, used slave ships to cross the 5,000 miles of treacherous sea. It was a long, arduous journey to reach the tiny island of Curaçao.
Yeah, the slaves arrived here on front of the building, and they were unshipped here. You must imagine they were on the ship for 6 to 8 weeks, but most of them...
Leo Helms is the director of the Kurahulanda Museum, which is built on the very site of Curaçao's old slave market.
And they were very weak and in a very bad condition when they arrived here. And then they stayed here on the property for 1 or 2 months, yeah, to get a little bit more stronger. They sent them out to the other mansions on the island to be trained how to work on the plantations. From here they were shipped to Cuba and North America.
Those that stayed behind in Curaçao learned how to adapt to their new life. Many had come from rich West African kingdoms, proud civilizations that had thrived in Mother Africa. Even though the slaves suffered unimaginable hardships, many of their old customs endured. So did their ancient knowledge of medicinal plants.
Come on in. Have a seat.
The old wisdom of medicinal plant use is still practiced at Den Paradera. This Curaçao woman, Sonia, is back for a visit. Like many from the Dutch Antilles, she now lives in the Netherlands. Sonia has experienced severe respiratory problems for the past 2 years, and modern medicines have failed to cure her. She has turned to Dina for help.
Just wait here. I will go get the herbs for you.
In her kitchen, Dina prepares several medicines made from medicinal plants to cure Sonia's ailment. They are old recipes passed on to her by island elders.
In the beginning, when doctors know that I was working, you know, with the plants, they laughed at me. But sometimes I had doctors here in the garden and they start asking questions. But nowadays, I mean, I'm accepted on this island. I know people come for advice. I can call a doctor. They know me, and I can ask what's the best medicine at this moment. Are herbs the best? Because I believe that we have to work together. Come here.
With Sonia's treatment complete, Dina leaves Den Paradera for a visit with some of her old friends. First on Dina's list today is to visit Sister Carmen.
Sister Carmen came formerly to iron my clothes.
She was one of the number of healers that Dina chronicled in her book, Green Remedies and Golden Customs of Our Ancestors.
So then we started to talk. I noticed that she knew a lot about herbs and that she wanted to conserve the herbs and that in her garden she had some herbs. So when she was ironing, I was asking. So I could sit with her for hours and hours and learning from Sister Carmen.
What is this plant? This is yerba de ole. When a child has a fever, you can put it on their feet or you can give it to them as a tea. How do they do that? They mash it up and mix it with coconut oil and put it on the feet. They also put it behind the ear? Yes, the herb relieves the problem.
Dina also stops by the home of another wise elder by the name of Cha-Cha.
Herbs are always good. Like chamomile, it will cleanse the insides. The sandura is always good for the stomach. Morning is the best time to drink herbs. This will give you a good appetite. If you have gas in your belly, you drink your mampuritu and you will get rid of the gas.
I had a very good time with Chacha because she has been learning from her aunt of her mother. So she knew a lot about medicinal herbs.
There are herbs that used to be easy to find. Now you don't see them anymore. Mampuritu is like that. You don't even see it in the schoolyards. It's all gone.
It was important for Dina to document the wise words of these elders, for their generation has nearly vanished. Today, few young islanders show much interest in medicinal plants.
What we need is people, young people, to learn the herbs from this country. At this moment, you see that plants and medicinal herbs are coming from Colombia, Venezuela, and Santo Domingo. A lot of them are sold on the market. I don't feel very well about that because it's not the same culture as that of Curacao. You can see on the market, it's dominating the culture of the island.
There is more to Curacao than its fanciful harborfront facade that greets incoming cruise ships. This city has the deepest harbor in the West Indies, making it a regional center for maritime commerce. Like many islands throughout the Caribbean, Curacao is modernizing. Most people here enjoy the conveniences of modern drugs, doctors, and medical facilities. Because of this, much of the ancient knowledge of medicinal plants is being left behind. But the cultural legacy of healers like Sister Carmen and Cha-Cha is not the only thing that is threatened. The wild places where medicinal plants grow are also under attack from urbanization, industrial expansion, and increased development. More people and more growth are beginning to tax the Kanuku, Curaçao's fragile, arid countryside. Dina makes one more stop before returning home to Den Paradera. She heads for one of her favorite spots near the sea. Dina has become increasingly worried as the numbers of wild medicinal plants dwindle each year. She blames the oil refineries in part for upsetting the ecological balance.
I'm very concerned. When the oil company came, they pumped a lot of water. So the water got down and people can make wells whenever they want. There are no rules. So we are losing the water that's under the ground. This year it was very, very hot. Almost 1 year, no rain. So we are losing very old trees who were more than 200 years old.
But Dina Ferris is not alone in her concern for the botanical wonders of Curaçao. Here, high on the slopes of Cristofel National Park, biologist John De Freitas searches for plants that hold potential medicinal cures. He works for a local institute called CARMABI, the Caribbean Marine Biological Foundation. They are doing baseline science, attempting to catalog the island's 500-plus plant species. The list has been cut to about 100 that show bacteria-fighting properties.
Here we have a number of endemic species. Endemic means that they only occur only on Curaçao or on the Leeward Islands of the Netherlands Antilles that comprises not only Curaçao but also Bonaire and Aruba.
One such unique species, called Eugenia, is one of two rare plants that interests De Freitas due to its strong antibacterial tendencies.
The name of this plant is Eugenia procera. It's only found in the Caribbean. And on Curaçao it's mostly found in the Cristofel Park and is part of the Myrtaceae family, to which also the eucalyptus tree belongs.
John also gathers samples of the divi tree while on the mountain slope. It has shown a remarkable ability to fight staph infections.
And there is a story of an old man, and he has very good eyesight, and he says that's due to the fact that he uses the divi leaves as an eye wash every morning. So that's a very interesting connotation. Divi was active against several microorganisms and had also the highest level of activity. So it's a very interesting result.
As John makes his way off Mount Cristofel, his work with Eugenia and the divi is just beginning. Back at the CARMABI Institute, the samples are dried. For those used in antimicrobial testing, ovens are used to speed up the process. For other samples that require examination of essential oils, the plants are spread out on a table. This drying process can take up to 2 weeks, and then the tests begin.
Yes, these are the results of the 10-layer chromatography of the plants we screened for antimicrobial properties.
To date, De Freitas' study has shown some promising results. A number of plants, including Eugenia and the divi, have shown strong activity against bacteria. This baseline science could lead other researchers in developing modern medicines based on the power of these ancient roots, stems, and leaves. In the year 2000, a study by Conservation International declared the Caribbean as one of the world's biodiversity hotspots, areas rich with flora and fauna of unique qualities. Curaçao, in spite of its arid terrain, is surprisingly biodiverse. But John, like Dina Ferris, is concerned with the island's future.
I'm concerned that certain areas that harbor certain plants, unique plant species that doesn't occur anywhere else on the island, it would be pity that those areas would be destroyed for economic development. If you destroy those areas, you won't have them back, and it will take many decades to create areas similar to those with those characteristics. That's why it's very important for these islands to look ahead and take into account conservation of these areas.
But not all of the island's natural medicinal wealth lies on the land. In the early 1990s, American researcher Bill Gerwick discovered a blue-green algae called Lingia majuscula, or mermaid's hair. Bill was able to isolate a chemical compound from the algae that he named Curacin A in honor of Curaçao. Early clinical studies showed that it had powerful anti-cancer properties. Today, Bill and his wife Lena, along with a crew from the CARMABI Institute, are getting ready to travel back to where this one-of-a-kind algae was discovered over a decade ago.
We made some of our first collections back in December 1991. And we found that Curaçao was very receptive to our coming and exploring their biodiversity for compounds that might be useful to treat human diseases. The particular bay that we've come to focus on is called Spanish Water. So what's really unique about the Spanish Waters Bay is that the blue-green algae growing there, it's known as Lingbia majuscula. You can find Lingbia majuscula in other bays nearby. But when we looked at the Lingbia majuscula from the other bays, they didn't produce the same compounds. They produced other compounds that were quite interesting, but they didn't produce curacin A.
Will you dive a computer or what?
No, I don't. This is a shallow dive, so, and it'll be less than an hour. No scorpions in there. That's always nice to know.
Gerwick and researcher Dolphy de Broot from Carmaby don their diving gear to revisit the rich collection site where the special algae was originally found. It's been several years since Bill collected here, and he is anxious to see what's below.
This mermaid's hair, or Lingbia majuscula as we know it in scientific terms, it's really quite a remarkable organism because it's actually a bacterium, but a giant bacterium. From the mangrove roots, it has one kind of a color. It's growing somewhat back underneath the mangroves, growing down as trellises. They're kind of fluffy and have a really quite beautiful reddish color oftentimes. The buried treasure here on this island, though, may not be on land. It may be in the sea. It may be some of these algae are creating molecules that will be enormously useful in helping human society.
Thanks, Charles. Hey, that was some great stuff there. We got some good samples.
Back on deck, Gerwick eagerly pulls out his field microscope and inspects the new collection.
These red hairs when we see them in the field, but here you can see that they're actually a whole series of little pancakes or coins stacked into these long filaments, and they're all encased in that sheath-like material. It's really quite a remarkable organism. It's been really nice to see that those algae are still living in that environment and are still quite healthy. So this is the treasure trove of natural products that we've been studying for the last nearly 15 years now. It's absolutely amazing the diversity and biological activity of the compounds that this little seaweed's making.
But after the excitement of the moment, Bill discovers a disturbing change in Spanish water. As their boat slowly leaves the bay, the beginnings of a new coastline development come into view.
It's really sad and really hard for me to see because it's going to destroy this habitat. This habitat that is very small and very unique, and it's given rise to this unique organism. We've not seen this organism anywhere else in the world. It will look just like it does over here. They're going to put in houses and docks and a marina and these kinds of things, and it's going to substantially alter this habitat. I would fully expect the organism to disappear. So when I see this kind of development going on, and it just really alarms me, because what they're doing is they're taking their future, this treasure trove of species and chemistry, and they're bulldozing it down, and we may never unearth this treasure again.
The problem is that the shoreline areas are an integral part of your marine ecosystem. Particularly when you're urbanizing areas like this, you're going to put in non-native trees that require pesticides to maintain. You're going to be putting in lawns with a great deal of water. They'll require nutrients, that is fertilizers and pesticides to maintain them too. And as a consequence, all that stuff leaches into the bay and destroys the habitat, contaminates it. The current island development plan, which was approved in 1997, approves about 90% of the shorelines of this bay for urban uses. And that will mean that this bay will essentially turn into an urban cesspool, with just lined with homes, no scenery, no nature left, and a mishmash of boats zooming around. And we already are facing human health-related water quality problems in parts of the bay during parts of the year. I can take you diving on that side of the bay, and you'll see beautiful white bottoms, ocean floor, but not due to white sand, which it should be, but due to toilet paper.
Not only is the future of mermaid's hair in jeopardy, but Curacao A, its cancer-fighting compound, is also facing challenges in the laboratory. Initial tests were promising and showed the substance to be highly toxic to cancerous cells. But in later experiments at the National Cancer Institute in Bethesda, Maryland, Curacao A was found to have solubility issues and was unstable when tested in mice. These problems were a major setback for the development of the compound into a modern drug.
And that said to us that the compound was unstable under the conditions of the body. So that has led subsequently now to an effort to refine that structure, make it a better molecule. And that's what we really should be looking to in nature. We should be looking for new ideas, new chemical templates, that we're going to take that new chemical structure from the seaweed and we're going to translate it into a molecule that's going to be an efficacious drug. We need to improve its water solubility and its stability in the body, and those efforts are taking place right now in various laboratories around the world.
One such place is here at the University of Pittsburgh, where chemistry professor Peter With has taken on the structural challenges of Curacao A.
The molecule was significant and interesting for us because it targeted a part of the biological machinery within the cell that's quite crucial for its growth, particularly in cancer cells. Basically, cancer cells are very similar to normal cells, and that's why it's so difficult to develop effective anti-cancer agents. But what we'd like to do is use the ability of structures such as Curacao A and the analogs that are developed on this basis to basically move cancer cells into what's called apoptosis or programmed cell death, cell suicide. Hello, Jane. How's it going?
But first, Professor Whiff and his students had to tackle the inherent problems of Curacao A. They overcame the solubility issue, making a chemical hybrid structure much like other drug-like molecules that dissolve easily in water. They also solved the compound's sensitivity to light.
It's a molecular tinker toy set, and we are able to build just about anything we'd like to build, and that's very satisfying, very challenging. You can truly take your visions and test them with the potential goal, of course, of improving the environment, improving human health, improving living in general.
Even though the new compound based on Curacao A showed increased biological activity, it faced another problem when tested with lab animals. The compound metabolized too quickly due to the animal's enzymes, not allowing it time enough to attack the tumor.
So we now know where the sensitive parts of the molecule are, and so we can address the problems in terms of stability towards the biological environment when the compound is actually given to an animal and is in the blood of an animal. But ultimately we hope that then we will have a compound that in the mouse will basically make human tumors disappear. But that's just the mouse system, so from there on you have to go to a higher animal and reproduce the same findings.
To make a modern drug from a natural substance is a long process, one full of delays and challenges. Peter With estimates that the development takes 2 to 7 years. That's not including the clinical trials that can take up to a decade before the drug is finally released to the public.
We really would like to see Curacao A analogs move into the clinic and test the hypothesis that we can develop an anti-cancer agent at the molecular level that has the kind of effect that we're predicting, stopping cell division and moving cancer cells selectively into cell suicide. We hope we can accomplish that, but even if we don't get to the final drug molecule, we hope we can learn a lot about the process, so maybe with another natural products next time around we'll be able to go all the way. So we have all this information. We can follow a single compound very well. What's still a huge challenge and something that makes us very modest again is the fact that very often in the end we cannot explain really what's going on. So we can see that some of these uses of traditional medicine, the folk medicine, that they're very valid. If you look at the big picture, at the overall organisms, people do feel better, they can get better quite well.
Back on Curacao, Dina Firis continues her one-woman crusade to save the traditional knowledge of island medicine and the desert's botanical wealth. If the convergence of ancient roots and modern medicine is to continue, people like Dina are essential human links in this vital process.
The future for medicinal plants in Curacao is the hope that I have, the hope that young people can go on with this, the hope that my children will learn to be able to spread, that my grandchildren would be able to know the herbs from the garden and the herbs from the mountain. That's the biggest joy I will have. Go Billy Bo, go Billy Bo, go Billy Bo,